This is an iPhone 15 Pro, and this is a Sony a7Rv, and they're very different cameras. And some would like you to think that one is inferior to the other. But is that the truth? As always in photography, there are nuances. Let's get into it. There's a certain amount of snobbery in photography. There's a certain subsection of people that let you believe that this is the only camera that you can use in professional applications. And there are certain elements of the photographic community that will tell you this is as good as this. Now, of course, that is absolute rubbish. Both have their place, both have their applications that they can be used in, but those applications are very, very different. If you're looking to print a very large image on a billboard, or perhaps for a commercial shoot that's going in a magazine, really high quality, lots of dynamic range, lots of sharpness, you need one of these. But if you're shooting in the social media environment, video, photographic images that require just to be online, then this is perfectly fine. It's not about the camera's capabilities, it's about what your output is. If you're only going to output to a smaller size or online, then this is absolutely fine. If you want to get better quality, high resolution images, then this is fine. Now, the real argument comes down to the quality of the pixel, the quality of the image that you're getting out of these cameras. And under ideal circumstances, you can get great images out of both. Out of this, you can get a 48 megapixel image that looks absolutely fantastic. Out of this, you can get a 61 megapixel image that looks brilliant. However, it starts to break down a little bit when you start to challenge the cameras. This camera has a zoom lens on it. It's a 24-105. At any focal length, that camera will be giving me a 61 megapixel output. However, the three cameras on this phone will not give me 48 megapixels out of each sensor. Now, I believe on the new iPhone 17 Pro it does. However, the telephoto lenses and the wider lenses are smaller pixels. That means the pixel density is higher. That means they're less capable in low light. It means there's less dynamic range, less capabilities all round. If I change lenses on this camera, it doesn't matter what lens I'm using, I'm still getting a 61 megapixel full frame output. And the best way to think of pixels is as light containers. The light containers on this are like huge buckets. They're big. There's lots of them over a large area. They can suck up huge amounts of light. The pixels on this one are like thimbles. They're much, much smaller. They can't suck in all that light. They're also packed closer together, so they interfere with each other, giving each other noise. Apple and other smartphone companies get around that by using computational photography. They will actually stack images. When I take a picture with this camera, it will take 10 or 12 images, each looking at a different thing, like the contrast, the color, the depth, and it will merge them all together in the blink of an eyelid. Before you even know it's done, it's done. And that includes the RAW. The RAW bakes in some of the data. This ProRAW that we have on the Apple iPhone is not the same as the RAW file that comes out of this Sony. So this morning, rather than go on about how much better one camera is than the other, I thought I would come down to the banks of the Tyne and test out both cameras side by side. And I came down early and I shot some low light stuff first of all. I shot the iPhone in night mode, and then I switched to the night mode off so it raised the ISO and didn't do so much computational photography. And I also shot the Sony a7Rv at low ISO and at high ISO. Both were mounted on the tripod, so we're trying to get the maximum image quality. Both were set to auto white balance. Now I'm just going to wait for the light to come up and shoot some more high contrast images. We've got the time bridge behind me here, the light's coming up behind it, so you've got that dark and the light together, and that'll be a really good test of the dynamic range. I'm shooting RAW on both. In fact, I'm shooting RAW and JPEG on the Sony, and I'm shooting RAW ProRAW on the iPhone, and I'm using their default app, so I've got the full 48 megapixel readout, if that's actually a 48 megapixel readout, and of course I've dropped down to 12 megapixel when I've done zooming in and zooming out on the different lenses. So I'm going to get a few more shots, and after which I'm going to take these images back to the studio and we'll have a look at just how different they are. And we'll talk a little bit more about why and how you should use each of these cameras, because they are both very capable cameras, but they have very different roles depending on your output. So welcome back to the studio. I've uploaded the images to the computer and we'll have a look at those in a moment. The light never really did get much brighter. This being February, this being the northeast of England, weather can be very, very fickle. So it actually turned out to be sort of one of those grey overcast days. So we're going to have to live with the images that I actually took rather than, you know, wait around for a bright sunny day to compare perfect lighted images. As always, my tests, my YouTube videos are always based on real life, on what happens in real life. It's not pixel peaking, it's not scientific, it's just how people use their cameras and their smartphones in real life. So in those terms, it's actually a really good comparison. We're going to be using PhotoLab 9 from DxO to look at these images today, and if you've been following my journey with DxO, you'll know that I'm really enjoying this software. If you'd like to purchase PhotoLab 9 or any other of their products, you can do so through the affiliate links in the description below, and I also have a 15% discount code for those, so feel free to make use of those. So without further ado, let's get into PhotoLab 9 and have a look at the different images that we took both on an iPhone 15 and a Sony Alpha R5. So here we have the images in PhotoLab 9. I've labelled them so that each one is exactly what it is. So this is iPhone main camera at night mode, iPhone main camera without night mode, etc, etc. And I think the first thing we'll actually do is we'll have a look at the two images taken on the iPhone in night mode and not in night mode, in low light conditions, and just have a quick look at how those two actually compare with each other. So on the left we have the image that was taken just in night mode on the iPhone, and on the right we have the image that was taken in standard mode. And as you can see, the night mode has made the image much brighter, much more contrasty. It's made those lights and colours pop a little bit more than it has with the standard mode. If we zoom in a little bit, you'll see immediately that there's a difference, and that difference is the fact that in night mode the iPhone has dropped the resolution from 48 megapixels down to 24 megapixels, and that might be an issue for you, that might not, depending on your output. You'll also see that it's much more contrasty. It's a better looking image overall. If we come over to the shadow areas here, you can see that the iPhone, which was at 1000 ISO in non-night mode, is quite noisy here. Now it's difficult to compare exactly one for one because obviously we have different image sizes, but you can see that the night mode has taken out that noise, but it also means that we don't have as much control over that image. We come back to 1:1, have a look at this image. If I just use, for example, the highlights slider here, you can see that the highlights are moving, but also the shadow areas are moving. And that means we've not got full control over it. If we go to the standard version, it's not much better, but you'll see that there is a slight extra amount of control over those highlight areas. We'll come back to that in a moment, but let's now compare the iPhone that was taken on the 48 megapixel camera without the night mode. And as you can see, it's a little bit noisy in the area here. We're going to compare that to a Sony a7Rv image, and we're going to compare it to this one. And as you can see, there is a striking difference in the contrast. DxO PhotoLab has applied all the corrections to this image. It has created the sort of ideal look for this RAW file on the Sony. The iPhone, under technically ideal conditions, is very flat. And as I mentioned, we can't really control much with that particular iPhone image. However, if I bring the highlights down on the Sony, you'll see that we have a lot more control over it. If I do the blacks on the Sony, it's only controlling the black areas. That's not what happens on the iPhone. If you use the highlights, it tends to affect all areas of the image. Much less control. And that's because of the amount of information that is baked into that ProRAW file. Now, that's not to say that this image is not bad and that we could perhaps get a better contrast and a better looking image out of it.
but it doesn't have that controllability. Now, this image was shot at 3200 ISO. Most of us will be shooting handheld, so the night mode or the standard mode on the iPhone, we would have been shooting handheld. It would possibly be a little bit blurry on the iPhone because we're only using 1000 ISO, but we have the image stabilization built in and stuff like that. As you can see, I've zoomed into the image on the Sony a7Rv and it's very, very noisy at 3200. However, if I apply noise reduction, I'll use DxO Deep Prime XD XD2S version. You can't see particularly well at the moment, but if I go over to the loop mode, and we'll drag this out here, and if we come up to say 200%, and you will see that's a very, very clean image. If we go back to the comparison, you can, as I say, you can't see loop mode in comparison mode. However, you could see there that this image will clean up much, much better than even this one. If we take this iPhone on its own, we'll come out of the comparison mode and we'll go to the iPhone image alone and we'll zoom into 200%. As we are at the moment, you can see it is noisy. It is noisy. You can see over here, if I click on the denoise, I don't have the option for the deep prime denoise. Now, I think in Lightroom, you can actually denoise. I'm not sure if it's an AI denoise in Lightroom, but certainly the AI denoise in PhotoLab 9 does not work on iPhone ProRAW files, whereas it works very, very well on the Sony files. Now, another thing that we were talking about was the fact that the iPhone lenses, as you change lens from the main camera to the telephoto and wide cameras, the pixel density goes up because the sensors are actually smaller. Now, I believe that the iPhone 17 now has the same megapixels on the telephoto lens and the wide angle lens. However, those sensors are still smaller, so you are getting less image quality. If we take a look at this image, this is the 77mm on the iPhone, and we'll compare it to the 24mm. So on the right we have the 77mm, and on the left we have the standard 24mm 48 megapixel lens. And you can see there's a big difference in the quality of the image. The 77mm is much flatter, lacking in contrast. It's sharp, it's a good image. It's also a lower resolution image. This is actually at 12 megapixels and this one is at 48 megapixels. And there is a definite degradation of image quality. If I actually zoom in and have a look at this area, even zoomed in, you can see that this is sharper. This wording on this sign is sharper on the image on the left than it is on the right. It's lacking in contrast and it just doesn't look as good. So if we come out to the daylight images, and as I said, it never really got that bright. This is the iPhone image. It was taken, the sun was up, but as you can see, it's quite cloudy in the background and the sun's not really giving us anything. I had kind of hoped that the sun would come up and we could have some really good backlit shots so that we could have a look at the dynamic range of the two cameras, but that didn't really work out. This one is the Sony a7R5 shot. Again, it's a very, very sort of grey day. It never really got that bright. So we're going to work with these two anyway as sort of real world examples. So let's have a look at them side by side. And you see that there is an immediate difference in contrast. The iPhone is much, much flatter because it uses this computational photography to give an HDR feel to it. So it's actually exposing one image for the highlights, one image for the shadows, one for the mid-tone areas. It exposes an image for the depth map to give an idea of where the image should be in focus, and it merges all of those together, giving us a fairly flat image. Obviously, the Sony a7R5 is literally straight out of the camera. And if I pull down the highlights on the Sony a7R5, you see it's just the highlights coming down, and I can bring them down very easily to match that iPhone image. And I can do the same with the shadow areas. If I bring those up, and immediately we've got an image that looks significantly better than that iPhone image. It has more dynamic range, it has more controllability, it has better color, better contrast, and of course if I zoom in, it's just a much better, sharper looking image. And just to finish off this comparison, let's just have a look at the iPhone 77mm telephoto lens and compare it to a similar image taken on the Sony a7R5. So this is the iPhone image. We'll use that as the reference image. And this is the Sony a7Rv. Now you can see the Sony is actually quite noisy. It was still at 3200 ISO. That's probably my mistake for not actually changing the ISO down. But again, if we run the deep prime on it, and we'll use the best quality deep prime, instantly takes away that noise. We'll have a look through the loop here, and that noise has pretty much gone completely at 3200 ISO. We go back to the comparison, and you can see there's a big difference in the quality. I will try to edit this iPhone image to make it look a little bit like the Sony Alpha image. So let's just have a look at that. And again, we'll see that its editability is just not there. We'll bring the exposure up a little bit. And then we'll just bring those highlights up a little bit like that. And you can see from the histogram, we are close to the maximum contrast of this image, and it still looks pretty flat. I'll bring the blacks down a little bit. I'll bring the shadows up a touch, the highlights a little bit more. We'll just go over to the exposure mode of PhotoLab 9, and we'll just maybe play with the contrast curve here a little bit to see if we can just add a little bit more contrast to it. And we can, to a certain extent. We have a little bit more control over the image if we use the curve rather than the highlight black sliders. It does come up a little bit, but we are introducing some noise. Let's go back to comparing the two images again. We'll use this one as the image reference, and then we'll go to the Sony one. And you can see that even with the manipulation, using the highlight tools and using the curve tools, we still can't get the contrast. There is a bit more information in the sky of the iPhone one. Again, that's the HDR mapping. But if we use the highlight tool a little bit more on the Alpha 7R5, if we use the tone curve tool, we can bring that sky down a little bit. We'll just come here, and then we'll just bring the curve up a little bit to maintain that contrast. And you've still got a much better image, and you're holding that sky a lot better. So I think that wraps it up for the look in PhotoLab 9. If you've enjoyed looking at PhotoLab 9, I think it's a really good piece of software. As I mentioned earlier, I do have a 15% discount code on all DxO software, and that information is in the description below. So what do we conclude from these tests, from this series of images? Well, the fact is that smartphones, iPhones, any other Android phones are good cameras. What it comes down to is the output, as I mentioned at the beginning of the video, where you want your images to be seen. Now, an iPhone will take very good pictures, but under good ideal conditions. And as we've seen this morning, in low light, it can take a decent image, but it's not ever going to compare to that of a DSLR or mirrorless camera, at least not for the foreseeable future. As soon as the smartphone is challenged by lighting conditions, it starts to break down. And it breaks down even more so in the editing. As we've seen, the Apple ProRAW is not a real ProRAW. It doesn't have that editability that those Sony files do, or indeed any other RAW files from a full-size camera. And that is a big difference. Certainly I can edit those files on my iPhone, and I can play around with the Photos app and get some great looking images. But if you zoom in on those on the Photos app, you will see them breaking apart. You will see them softer, lots of noise. There is no substitute for being able to edit a really nice file. What we take in camera is often not the creative vision that we have for that shot. And if I wanted to do, for example, a dark, moody shot of a lighthouse with an iPhone, I don't have as much control over that final image, even in Lightroom or PhotoLab, to be able to get the look I want. That said, if I wanted to take that same lighthouse on a bright sunny day and get a really nice travel style image, landscape style image, I certainly could with a smartphone. So as I said at the beginning of this video, it's not that iPhones are bad or smartphones are bad, and it's not that bigger cameras are good. It's just that we need to manage the expectations that we have from our cameras. We need to understand where we wish to put those images. If the images are being used for a commercial photo shoot or a big print that's going to go on somebody's wall, then you're going to want the maximum control and the maximum image quality. You're going to need a big sensor. If, however, you want to print a few 20-inch A2 style images that will go on your wall, if the image is taken in great light or good light, then an iPhone, a smartphone will be absolutely fine for that. It's about the output. Neither is good, neither is bad, neither is best. Both are suited to the job they're designed for. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, a like would be fantastic, a subscription would be even better, and I really look forward to seeing you in the next one.